Always wear safety glasses when working in the shop.
The safety glasses are over here by the sink in the white cabinet here. Make sure that you are grabbing a pair anytime you're working with tools or working near somebody who has the tools. If you are wearing glasses like I do, they should still fit over the top. And if you require a different pair, come see one of us and we will get you a pair that might fit better over your glasses. Or if you've got a smaller head and these feel too big, we can get you a pair that are a little bit smaller.
Wearing safety glasses means that when you are working, they are on your face. Safety glasses should not be on the top of your head while you are working. They do not do much good up there. And if you take your safety glasses off, you do not set them down on the lens. You always set your safety glasses down when you're not working on the upper frame or the blue portion, which is exactly where we place them when we set them back in the safety glasses cabinet. At the end of the day, all the safety glasses need to be placed back exactly where they belong, sitting correctly, or we will not get to be dismissed yet.
Report all accidents, injuries, and broken equipment to the instructor immediately.
Any accident we need to know about. When you tell us about an accident, we have first aid kit and safety materials and health materials up here in Poulis's aid kit. This includes gauze, bandages, disinfectants, cotton swabs, everything we need to make sure that you are safe if there is an accident or injury to occur in the shop.
We've both been trained in first aid, and so we are going to do our absolute best to keep you safe and to minimize any complications that may happen. Wait for the tool to stop completely before you leave.
We have many different pieces of equipment in here that continue to run after you've shut them off. Examples would be the scroll saw, the bandsaw, the disc sanders, the drill presses, and the lathes. It's very important that you don't leave the machine until the machine has stopped moving, because it could be off and it still could be moving. Okay? So that's really important. Any piece of equipment you're using, do not leave it, and do not take your safety glasses off until the machine has come to a complete stop, and then you may leave. Start the machine before you push the wood into the sandpaper.
When you're using the disc sander, we want to make sure that your stuff is sitting here, it's ready to go. We turn it on, but the board isn't touching the sandpaper, because if it's touching the sandpaper, what can happen is the sandpaper catches on the board and it can rip the sandpaper. So we want to really make sure that we let the sander get up to speed, and then we push the board into it and allow for the sander to do its job.
Keep hands and fingers 3 inches away from sandpaper when the machine is running.
When you're using the disc sanders, we want to make sure that as it's spinning and it's turned on, that your fingers aren't getting too close to that sandpaper. The sandpaper on here is pretty rough. It's not designed to be a final sanding for your project, and because it's so rough, it will not take long to scratch the skin off of your hands, your fingers, if it accidentally hits that sandpaper. So please make sure that you are keeping your fingers at least 3 inches away from the sandpaper while that sander is running. Do not overload the sander with excessive pressure. It will not work better, and it damages the tools.
This sandpaper is quite expensive, and it's very, very rough. Because of the high speeds that these disc sanders work at, you don't have to push hard for the disc sander to do its job. If you push too hard and you have too much power behind it when you're using it, you can actually damage the sandpaper and damage your project that you're working on. So we want to make sure that after we let it get up to speed, that we use consistent, nice pressure as we work it along the sandpaper, allowing the sandpaper to do the work and not us. Before starting the machine, check for cuts and tears in the sandpaper. Do not use the sandpaper if it is ripped.
Before you turn that sander on, we want to just very quickly spin it by hand. Again, do not turn it on yet. And check to see that it's stuck on there nice and tight, and that there are no rips or worn out spots or holes in that sandpaper. If you look at the two sanders here, you'll notice this one has sandpaper and this one does not have any sandpaper. So you need to be aware that sometimes the sanders aren't all set up with a good piece of sandpaper. Some of them are still waiting to have sandpaper installed.
Do not interrupt other people while they are using the equipment.
When people are using the tools, it could be the hand tools or one of the stationary tools like the bandsaw or the drill press or something like that. We want to make sure that you're not interrupting them. We want them to be able to concentrate on what they're working on. And if you're interrupting, it makes it very, very hard for somebody else to focus on the project that they're working on and use the tools safely. Work at a safe speed and concentrate on what you're working on.
This rule ties in with a lot of different rules we have in the shop. But the idea is that you are focusing and concentrating on the work before you, and that you're doing it at a safe and appropriate speed for the tool and the task at hand. This allows you to be efficient and safe within the shop for you and your peers.
Only one person can use the machine at a time.
If Mr. P is over here working, I'm not going to come over, and he's not going to work on one side and I'm not going to work on the other. Only one person can be working on a time because only one side of a disc sander is made to be used for sanding. The other side is not safe to use. So we only have room for one person to work. Do not slow the machine down by applying too much pressure.
The motors on these sanders are pretty big. They're pretty powerful. And if you try to slow them down by putting a piece of scrap or your project in there, you're going to do damage not so much to the motor of this probably, but to the sandpaper itself and whatever you're sticking into that sandpaper. So we don't want to tear up the sandpaper. The sandpaper for these is pretty expensive, and we want to preserve that and use it as long as we can before having to replace it. So if you are pushing on this real hard, you're going to clog up the sandpaper, you're going to damage the sandpaper. Please, light pressure. The sandpaper is aggressive. It's going to take a lot of the material off of your project quickly, and you don't need that much pressure. Only sand on the side of the disc that is moving downward.
The disc spins counterclockwise, so it goes from right to left, which means that this disc is going to move this direction. You can only sand on the direction that it is moving downwards because it'll lock your project in place as it sands. If you were to try and do it on this side, it would be extremely unsafe. It would want to throw your project and it would risk throwing your hand into the disc sander. So you only want to sand on the left downward side of this disc sander or on the downward side of any disc sander. Only use the sander for class projects. Do not use the sander for other reasons.
The sanders are here for you to work on your projects, whether that's a class project or even a club sawdust project. What we don't want to see you doing is taking things out of the scrap box and just running them into the sander to create more sawdust. And we don't want you doing things like sharpening pencils or doing stuff like that. The sanders are here for your projects. It's a nice, easy way for us to shape our projects. We don't want to misuse the tools. Do not sand small pieces on the sanders.
When we're sanding small pieces on the sanders, we have to remember that we still have to remain 3 inches away with our hands. So if the material that you're sanding in your project means that your hands have to be closer than 3 inches, then you're going to have to find an alternative way to sand that piece of material or project. Even if this would be faster, it's not worth the safety risk of you accidentally putting your hands in the sander to be able to use the disc sander for those kinds of small projects that are under 3 inches. Move material back and forth on the sandpaper to reduce heat and wear and tear of the sandpaper.
When you're using the disc sander, if you're sanding in one spot and you're not moving your piece back and forth, you're going to create these rings that you see here on the sandpaper. So what we want to do is try to move our stuff slightly side to side, keeping it flat to the table here, but moving it side to side to wear the sandpaper evenly. Again, if we're doing it in one spot only, it creates these rings where the sandpaper gets clogged from all of that sawdust staying in just that one spot.